There's a specific kind of ache that lives in the chest. It doesn't announce itself with drama or noise. It just sits there, quiet and patient, waiting for moments when you're alone. It's the feeling that no matter how much someone says they love you, it never quite reaches the place inside that needs it most. You hear the words, you see the gestures, but somewhere deep down, a voice whispers that it's not enough, that you're not enough. And the cruelest part is you don't know why. Maybe it started when you were small, too small to have words for what you felt. You reached for warmth and found something conditional instead. Love that came with rules. Affection that required you to be quieter, smaller, more convenient. And you learned without anyone teaching you that love isn't something you receive just for existing. It's something you earn. Something you have to work for. Something that can be taken away if you're not careful enough. This is where the wound forms. Not in the loud moments of rejection, but in the silent ones. The times no one noticed you were hurting. The times you tried to share something important and met with distraction. The times you needed reassurance and got criticism instead. Each moment, so small on its own, but together they build a belief system, a lens through which you see every relationship for the rest of your life. You grow up. You leave that house, that childhood, those early years behind. But the feeling doesn't leave. It follows you into friendships where you give more than you receive, into romantic relationships where you search their eyes for proof that you matter, into late nights where you replay conversations, looking for the hidden message that confirms what you've always suspected, that their love has limits, that eventually you'll be too much or not enough, and they'll leave like everyone else. Psychologists call this an anxious attachment style, but that phrase doesn't capture the lived experience of it. It doesn't explain what it feels like to be constantly bracing for abandonment, to interpret every moment of distance as rejection, to need reassurance so desperately that you hate yourself for needing it, because you can see it happening. You can watch yourself push people away by holding them too tight, but you can't stop. The fear is too old, too deep, too woven into the fabric of who you've become. There's a particular loneliness in this experience, because you can be in someone's arms and still feel alone. You can hear them say they love you and feel nothing but doubt. Your mind has been trained to search for evidence of what's wrong, not what's right, to scan for signs of fading interest, to measure love by intensity rather than consistency. And when the intensity inevitably settles into something calmer, your nervous system interprets it as abandonment beginning. It's exhausting to live this way, to never feel secure, to always be one step away from panic, to interpret silence as anger, busyness as disinterest, independence as rejection. Your brain is trying to protect you from the pain you experienced before, but in doing so, it creates the very abandonment it fears, because people can feel when they're being tested. And here's what makes it even more complicated. The people who struggle with feeling loved enough often choose partners who confirm their fears. Not consciously, but unconsciously. They're drawn to people who are emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or withholding. The part of them that was never loved enough in childhood recognizes the same pattern in adulthood and thinks, this is what love is supposed to feel like. A constant reaching, a perpetual uncertainty, a desperate attempt to earn what should be freely given. This is the psychology of repetition compulsion. We recreate our original wounds in an unconscious attempt to heal them. The child inside you who never felt loved enough is still trying to get that early caregiver to finally see you, choose you, prioritize you. But you can't do that anymore. That person, that time, that opportunity is gone. So, you transfer that need onto every person who gets close. And you ask them to fill a void they didn't create and cannot fill. Because here's the truth that no one wants to hear. No external love, no matter how pure or consistent, can fix what wasn't given to you in childhood. That's not a condemnation. It's not saying you're broken beyond repair. It's simply recognizing that the wound of not being loved enough creates a hunger that can't be satisfied from the outside. Other people's love can nourish you, support you, bring you joy, but it cannot become the foundation of your worth. That foundation has to be built from within, and that's where the real work begins. Not in finding someone who loves you better, though that matters, but in understanding why their love never feels like enough. In tracing the feeling back to its origin, in recognizing that the voice telling you you're unlovable isn't yours. It's an echo of moments when you were made to feel that way, by people who were too hurt, too limited, too absent to give you what you needed. There's a concept in psychology called internal working models. These are the unconscious blueprints we develop in childhood about how relationships work. If your early experiences taught you that love is conditional, inconsistent, or withheld, your brain builds a model that says, "This is what I should expect." And from that point forward, you filter every relationship through that lens. Even when someone shows up consistently, your model tells you it won't last. Even when someone reassures you, your model tells you they don't really mean it. This isn't paranoia, it's adaptation. Your young mind did the best it could with the information it had. It learned that hoping for love and being disappointed was more painful than never hoping at all, so it built defenses. It learned to expect less, to brace for loss, to interpret ambiguity as rejection, and those defenses served you then. They helped you survive an environment where love wasn't safe. Those same defenses are keeping you from receiving the love that is available, from trusting the people who are trying to reach you. The hardest part of healing from this is learning to distinguish between past and present, because your nervous system doesn't automatically know the difference. When your partner doesn't text back immediately, your body might respond the same way it did when you were 7 and your parent ignored you. The intensity of the feeling is the same, but the context is completely different. That's why healing requires more than understanding. It requires retraining your nervous system to recognize safety when it's present, to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty without spiraling into catastrophe, to allow yourself to be vulnerable even when every instinct tells you to protect yourself, that someone can love you and still need space. That conflict doesn't mean abandonment, and slowly, very slowly, you begin to build a new internal working model, one that says love can be safe, that people can stay even when things get hard, that you don't have to earn affection by being perfect, that your needs aren't too much, that you are worthy of the love you've been seeking. Not because you've proven yourself, but simply because you exist. But even as you begin to heal, there will be moments when the old wound reopens, when something triggers that ancient fear and suddenly you're small again, desperate again, convinced again that you're about to lose everything. And in those moments, the most important thing you can do is not fight the feeling, not shame yourself for having it, but instead, this is what reparenting looks like. It's not about erasing the past, it's about giving yourself now what you didn't receive then. It's telling yourself, I know you're scared, and that's okay. You are safe with me. It's learning to become the source of the love you've been seeking, not because other people's love doesn't matter, but because until you can hold yourself with tenderness, you'll never fully believe that anyone else can either. And here's what happens when you start to do this work. Your relationships begin to change, not because the other person is different, but because you are. You stop testing their love. You stop scanning for signs of abandonment. You start to notice the quiet ways they show up, the consistency you couldn't see before because you were too focused on intensity, that they're not keeping score, that you don't have to earn their presence. This doesn't mean the fear disappears completely. It doesn't mean you never doubt or worry or feel insecure, but it means those feelings no longer define your entire experience of love. They become waves you can ride rather than storms that drown you. You learn that you can feel afraid and still choose trust, that you can need reassurance sometimes without it meaning you're broken, that healing isn't about becoming invulnerable, it's about becoming gentle with yourself in your vulnerability. There's a profound shift that happens when you stop trying to get love from the people who couldn't give it, when you stop replaying those old relationships in your mind, searching for what you could have done differently to make them stay, to make them choose you, to make them see your worth, because the truth is, it was never about you. Their inability to love you the way you needed had nothing to do with your lovability. It was about their own limitations, their own wounds, their own capacity. And you deserved more than they could give. And that deserving, that inherent worthiness, doesn't require proof. It's not something you have to earn or demonstrate. It simply is. You were born worthy of love, and nothing you did or didn't do as a child changed that fundamental truth. The adults in your life who failed to love you adequately were operating from their own brokenness. And while that doesn't excuse the pain they caused, it does release you from the belief that you were the problem. This realization is both liberating and heartbreaking, because it means grieving what you didn't receive, acknowledging that those early years, when you needed unconditional love most, you got something conditional instead, or inconsistent, or absent, and you can't go back and change it. You can't make those people suddenly capable of giving you what you needed. All you can do is mourn what should have been and begin the work of giving it to yourself now. The grieving process is not linear. Some days you'll feel angry at the people who hurt you. Other days you'll feel sad for the child you were. Sometimes you'll feel both at once, and that's okay. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. It moves through you in its own time. And the more you allow it, the more space it creates for something new, for self-compassion, for acceptance, for the gradual understanding that you are not defined by what was done to you. As you heal, you'll notice something interesting. The people you attract begin to change. Or rather, the people you allow close begin to change, because you're no longer unconsciously seeking out relationships that confirm your unworthiness. You're no longer drawn to people who make you work endlessly for scraps of affection. Instead, you start to recognize and appreciate the people who offer consistency, who show love through actions, not just words, who don't make you guess, who meet you with the same energy you bring. And when you find these people, there's a moment of disorientation, because their love feels so different from what you're used to. It feels too easy, too simple, too available. Your old patterns tell you that if someone isn't making you chase them, if they're not keeping you uncertain, if they're not requiring you to prove yourself, then something must be wrong. But nothing is wrong. This is what secure love feels like, and your system just isn't used to it yet. Learning to receive this kind of love requires its own form of courage, because it asks you to trust in a way you never have before, to believe that someone can see all of you, the messy parts, the wounded parts, the parts you've always hidden, and still choose to stay, not because they're perfect, or because the relationship is effortless, but because they've chosen you, fully and consciously, and you've chosen them the same way. This is where the transformation completes itself. When you realize that love was never meant to be a test you had to pass, it was meant to be a space where both people could be imperfect and still held, where love wasn't measured by grand gestures but by small, consistent acts of showing up. And maybe for the first time, you understand that being loved enough was never about finding someone who could give you more. It was about healing the part of you that believed you needed to be more to deserve love at all. It was about recognizing that the enough you were searching for outside was always meant to be cultivated within. Not in isolation, but in the gentle, patient work of befriending yourself, of speaking to yourself with kindness, of recognizing your own worth without needing someone else to confirm it first. This doesn't mean you don't need other people. Humans are wired for connection. We need relationships, community, intimacy, but the quality of those connections changes when they're built on a foundation of self-worth rather than self-doubt. When you come to relationships already feeling whole, you're not asking the other person to complete you. You're inviting them to walk alongside you, to share in the fullness of life, not to fill an emptiness that was never theirs to fill. And when you meet someone from this place, something beautiful happens. You stop performing. You stop trying to be whatever you think they need you to be. You show up as yourself, uncertain and imperfect, and you trust that it's enough, not because you've suddenly become more lovable, but because you finally recognize that you always were. The love you were seeking was never about being worthy of it. It was about believing you were worthy of it all along. There will still be hard days. Days when the old wound aches, when you feel that familiar hunger for reassurance, when you doubt whether anyone could truly love you. But on those days, you'll have something you didn't have before, a relationship with yourself that can hold you through the fear, a voice inside that can remind you of the truth, that you are not the frightened child anymore, that you survived, that you're still here, and that alone is proof of your strength, your resilience, your worthiness of love. The psychology of never being loved enough is ultimately a story about the human need for connection and what happens when that need isn't met. But it's also a story about resilience, about the incredible capacity of the human heart to heal even when it's been hurt deeply, about the possibility of building new patterns, new beliefs, new ways of relating that honor both your need for love and your inherent worthiness of it. So if you're someone who has spent your life feeling like love is never quite enough, know this. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because something was wrong in what you were given. And while you can't change the past, you can change how you carry it forward. You can choose to stop searching for enough in other people and start building it in yourself. Not to become self-sufficient and closed off, but to become secure enough to let love in when it's real, to recognize it when it arrives, to trust it enough to stay. And one day, you'll find yourself in a quiet moment with someone who loves you, and instead of scanning their face for signs of leaving, you'll simply be present. You'll feel the warmth of their hand. You'll hear the steadiness in their voice. You'll notice how they showed up, again, just like they said they would. And in that moment, something inside you will finally exhale. Not because they've given you enough love, but because you've finally allowed yourself to receive it. That's where healing lives. Not in the absence of the wound, but in the presence of compassion. In the gentle recognition that you were always deserving, that the love you needed was real and valid, and that, even though you didn't receive it then, you can create space for it now. Not by demanding it from others, but by offering it to yourself first. And then, from that wholeness, inviting others to love you not because you need them to complete you, but because you've chosen to share your completeness with them. This is the quiet revolution that happens when you heal from never being loved enough. You stop searching for someone to save you. You stop performing for approval. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's capacity to see it. Instead, you become the one who sees yourself clearly, who loves yourself through the uncertainty. And from that foundation, every relationship becomes different, lighter, more honest, more real, because you're no longer asking anyone to be everything. You're simply asking them to be present, to be honest, to meet you where you are. And suddenly, that's enough. Not because love has changed, but because you have. You've learned that love isn't something you chase or earn or prove yourself worthy of. It's something you allow. And maybe that's the most profound lesson of all, that the love you were searching for outside was always meant to begin inside. That healing doesn't mean never needing anyone again. It means needing them from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness. It means building relationships that are chosen, not desperate, that are mutual, not one-sided, that are built on truth, not the fear of being alone. So if you recognize yourself in these words, if you've spent your life feeling like you're never quite loved enough, please hear this. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not unlovable. You are simply carrying a wound that was given to you before you had the language to understand it. And now, with awareness, with compassion, with patience, you can begin to heal it. Not by finding someone who loves you better, though that may come, but by learning to love yourself the way you always deserve to be loved. Fully, unconditionally, enough. And when you do that, when you finally come home to yourself, you'll understand that the love you were seeking was never about being enough for someone else. Just as you are, just as you've always been. Enough. But let's go deeper into what this actually looks like in daily life. Because understanding the theory is one thing. Living through the healing is something else entirely. When you've spent years feeling like love is never enough, your entire nervous system has adapted to that belief. It's encoded in your body, in your reactions, in the way you hold yourself when someone gets too close. You might notice it in the smallest moments. Someone compliments you, and your first instinct is to deflect. They tell you they're proud of you, and you immediately list all the ways you could have done better. These aren't conscious choices. They're automatic responses born from years of believing that love is temporary, conditional, or somehow earned through constant vigilance and perfection. There's something psychologists call hypervigilance in relationships. It's when your nervous system is constantly scanning for threats to connection. You read tone of voice like it's a code you need to crack. You analyze text messages for hidden meanings. You watch their face for micro-expressions that might reveal they're losing interest. And the exhausting part is that you know you're doing it. You can see yourself searching for problems that might not exist, but you can't stop because the fear of being blindsided by abandonment feels worse than the exhaustion of constant monitoring. This hypervigilance creates a painful paradox. You want intimacy desperately, but intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like handing someone a weapon they could use to destroy you. So you hover in this uncomfortable middle space, close enough to feel something, but not close enough to be truly seen. You share pieces of yourself, but never the whole truth. You let people in, but only to the rooms you've carefully decorated. The messy parts, the shameful parts, the parts you're afraid are unlovable, those stay hidden behind locked doors. And here's what makes this so complicated. The people who love you can feel those locked doors. They can sense the walls you've built. And often they interpret your guardedness as disinterest or rejection. They think you don't trust them or don't want them close. When the truth is the opposite. You want them so close it terrifies you. You want to be known so completely that the thought of it makes you want to run. Because being fully known means being fully vulnerable to loss. This is where many relationships break. Not because the love isn't real, but because the person who never felt loved enough keeps pushing away the very love they're desperate for. They test it. They create distance to see if the other person will fight for them. They pick fights to see if their partner will stay through conflict. They withdraw to see if they'll be pursued. And sometimes, the other person does fight, does pursue, does stay, but eventually, they get tired, because it feels like nothing they do is ever enough. The tragedy is that the person doing this often doesn't realize they're creating the abandonment they fear. They're not trying to sabotage the relationship. They're trying to protect themselves from inevitable pain. But the protection becomes the problem. The walls built to keep pain out also keep love out. And so the cycle continues. Another relationship ends. Another confirmation that love doesn't last. Another piece of evidence that you were right to guard your heart. But what if the pattern could be interrupted? What if you could recognize the moment you're about to push someone away and choose differently? This is where conscious healing begins, not in understanding why you do it, though that matters, but in the split second between the trigger and the reaction. In that brief moment when you feel the fear rising and you have a choice, you can follow the old pattern and protect yourself through distance. Or you can do something terrifying. You can stay. You can voice the fear instead of acting on it. You can say, "I'm scared you're going to leave." This level of vulnerability feels impossible at first, because it means naming the exact thing you're most afraid of. It means handing someone the truth of your terror and trusting they won't use it against you. And maybe they won't respond perfectly. Maybe they'll be confused or defensive or unsure what to say. But here's what happens when you speak your fear out loud. It loses some of its power. The unnamed dread that's been controlling your behavior suddenly becomes something you can examine together, something that's no longer yours alone to carry. There's a concept in therapy called earned secure attachment. It's the idea that even if you didn't develop secure attachment in childhood, you can build it in adulthood through new relational experiences and conscious healing work. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through small moments of risk and repair, moments where you expect abandonment and receive reassurance instead, moments where you brace for criticism and receive acceptance, moments where you test the relationship and discover it's strong enough to hold your fear. Each of these moments is a tiny rewiring of your nervous system. Your brain is learning that love can be safe, that people can be consistent, that vulnerability doesn't always lead to pain. And slowly, so slowly you might not even notice it happening, your baseline begins to shift. The constant anxiety softens, the hypervigilance eases. Not intellectually, but in your bones, that maybe this person isn't going anywhere, that maybe their love doesn't require you to be perfect. But even as you heal, there will be moments of regression, moments when something triggers the old wound and suddenly you're back in that childhood feeling, convinced again that love is about to be taken away. And in those moments, it's crucial to remember that regression isn't failure. It's part of the process. Healing isn't linear. It's a spiral. You think you've moved past something, and then you encounter it again, but from a slightly different angle, with slightly more awareness, with slightly more capacity to hold yourself through it. The difference is that now you have tools. You can recognize what's happening. You can name it. You can say to yourself or to your partner, "I'm being triggered right now. This isn't about you. This is about something old." Space between the stimulus and the response. Space to not let the past dictate the present. And here's something crucial that often gets missed in conversations about healing. You don't heal alone. Yes, the work is ultimately yours to do. No one can do it for you. But healing happens in relationship. It happens when you risk being vulnerable and someone meets you with care, when you expect judgment and receive compassion, when you show your messiest self and they don't leave. They're the antidote to the original wound, because if the wound happened in relationship, the healing happens there too. This is why choosing the right people matters so much. Not everyone is capable of holding space for your healing. Some people are too caught up in their own wounds. Others lack the emotional capacity for the kind of depth this work requires. And some people, often unconsciously, are drawn to your wound because it matches their own dysfunctional patterns. They need you to stay wounded because it confirms their worldview or allows them to avoid their own healing. Learning to discern who is safe and who isn't becomes essential, and that discernment develops through experience. Do you feel more yourself or less? Do you feel seen or invisible? Do they respond to your vulnerability with curiosity and care, or do they minimize it, mock it, or use it against you later? These are the questions that guide you toward people who can truly love you, not just the idea of you. And when you find those people, when you encounter someone whose love feels different, steadier, more spacious, there's often a period of disbelief. You keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to reveal that this was all conditional, that their patience has limits, that eventually you'll be too much and they'll leave like everyone else. But they don't. They stay, not because they're perfect or because the relationship is easy, but because they've chosen you with full awareness. They see your wounds and they're not afraid of them. This is what secure love looks like. It's not the absence of problems. It's the presence of commitment to working through them. It's knowing that conflict doesn't mean the end. That distance doesn't mean abandonment. That having needs doesn't make you a burden. It's the slow, steady accumulation of evidence that this person is reliable, that their actions match their words, that when they say they love you, they mean it in a way that includes all of you, not just the easy parts. But even within secure love, the wound of never being loved enough can whisper its doubts. Days when you're convinced they're going to leave even though they've given no indication of it. Days when you feel like you're too much, too needy, too broken to deserve the love you're receiving. And on those days, the healing isn't about making the feeling go away. It's about learning to hold the feeling without acting on it. It's about recognizing that this is the wound speaking, not reality. It's about soothing yourself the way you wish someone had soothed you then. This is the practice of reparenting yourself. It's talking to that frightened inner child who learned that love is unreliable. It's telling them, I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt before, but I'm here now. I'm not going to abandon you. You are safe with me. And at first, this might feel silly or ineffective. You might think, how can talking to myself change anything? But neurologically, it does. When you speak to yourself with compassion, you activate the same neural pathways that are activated when someone else speaks to you with compassion. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between self-compassion and other compassion. And the more you practice this, the more it becomes your default mode. The harsh inner critic that used to tell you that you're unlovable starts to quiet down. In its place emerges a gentler voice, one that can acknowledge your fear without being consumed by it, one that can hold your pain without drowning in it, one that can remind you of the truth when the wound tries to tell you lies about your worthiness. This internal shift changes everything, because when you're no longer at war with yourself, when you're no longer trying to prove your worth or earn your existence, you show up in relationships differently. You're not grasping for love because you already have a foundation of it within yourself. You're not scanning for rejection because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes. And paradoxically, this is when love becomes most available to you. Not because you've changed who you are fundamentally, but because you've removed the barriers you built to protect yourself. You've learned that the walls you constructed to keep pain out were also keeping love out. And dismantling those walls, brick by brick, moment by moment, is how you finally allow yourself to receive what you've been seeking all along. There's something sacred that happens in this process, a kind of homecoming. You realize that the love you were searching for in every relationship, every validation, every desperate attempt to be seen, was always yours to give yourself first. And once you do, once you learn to hold yourself with the tenderness you wish you'd received, everything else falls into place. Not perfectly, not without continued work, but with a foundation solid enough to weather the storms. The people who never felt loved enough often become the most compassionate lovers once they heal, because they know intimately what it feels like to be unseen. They know what it costs to guard your heart. They know the courage it takes to stay vulnerable, and so when they love with an awareness that others might not have. They show up consistently. They create safety for others to be imperfect, because they've learned how much that safety matters. This is the gift hidden within the wound. Not that the wound was good or necessary, but that having survived it, having done the work to heal it, you become capable of a depth of love that those who've never been wounded might not reach. You know that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up when it's boring. It's about staying when it's hard. It's about seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway. And maybe that's the final truth about never being loved enough. That it taught you, in the hardest way possible, what real love looks like, what it requires, what it costs. And now, armed with that knowledge, you can choose differently. You can open your heart even when it trembles. You can trust that the risk of love is worth it, not because you're guaranteed a happy ending, but because the alternative, staying closed forever, isn't really living at all. So, if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in every word, know that you're not alone. Know that what you're feeling is real and valid and understandable. Know that the wound you carry wasn't your fault. But also know that healing is possible. That you don't have to spend the rest of your life feeling like love is never enough. That with time, with compassion, you can rewrite the story. You can become the person who knows, deeply and unshakably, that you are worthy of love. Not because you've earned it, but because you exist, and that existence, that fundamental fact of your being, is enough. It always has been. You just needed time to believe it.